The rusty anchor smelled like salt, wood polish, and 40 years of spilled whiskey. Fishing nets draped across the ceiling, tangled with ancient ship wheels and brass lanterns that swayed every time someone slammed the door. It was the kind of bar where locals drank away their troubles and tourists took one look inside before deciding they'd rather not. Maeve O'Sullivan liked it that way. She wiped down the scarred oak bar top for the third time that hour, her copper-red hair escaping its bun in wild spirals that framed her face. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon, just old Pete nursing his usual beer in the corner and the jukebox playing some mournful sea shanty that matched her mood perfectly. The door opened, letting in a slash of autumn sunlight and a man who definitely didn't belong there. He was older, mid-50s maybe, with silver threading through dark hair and a tan that spoke of time spent outdoors rather than in tanning beds. Broad shoulders filled out a casual linen shirt, and when he walked in, it was with the kind of easy confidence that came from knowing exactly who you were. His face was weathered in that way that made him more handsome, not less. Crow's feet, strong jaw, dark eyes that took in the whole room before landing on her. Maeve felt her spine tighten automatically. Rich guys slumming it, probably. They got those sometimes during tourist season. "We're open," she said, not bothering to smile. "But if you're looking for craft cocktails and small plates, you're about 3 miles down the wrong road." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Good. I hate small plates." His voice was deep, rumbling out of his chest like distant thunder. He slid onto a bar stool with an ease that suggested he spent plenty of time in places like this. "Whiskey. Neat. Whatever you got that's decent." Maeve raised an eyebrow but reached for the Jameson. Not the top shelf, but not the rock good either. She poured 2 fingers and slid it across the bar. He took a sip, nodded approval. "You've got good taste." "I've got a liquor license and a preference for customers who don't complain," she corrected. "The taste is incidental." That earned her an actual smile. "Fair enough." She went back to wiping down bottles that didn't need wiping, hyper-aware of him watching her. It wasn't creepy. Not quite. It was assessing, like he was reading a book he found unexpectedly interesting. "You work here long?" he asked for a moment. "Long enough." Maeve didn't look up. "You passing through or looking to waste an afternoon?" "Maybe both." He took another sip. "Place has character. Feels lived in." "That's one word for it." She finally met his eyes. They were dark brown, almost black, and far too knowing. Most people say dated or in need of renovation. Most people don't know what they're talking about. Despite herself, Maeve felt the edge of a smile pull at her lips. She crushed it. The last thing she needed was to encourage some Silver Fox tourists who'd be gone by the weekend. The door banged open again. Maeve's jaw tightened. Liam slumped in, all 6'3" of him, thin as a rail and looking like he'd slept in his clothes. Again. His eyes were bloodshot, his grin sheepish. "Maeve," he started, and she already knew what was coming. "Listen, I just need—" "No." She didn't even let him finish. "Absolutely not. Get out, Liam." 5 minutes, I swear. I said out." Her voice could have stripped paint. "You want to talk to me? You show up sober and during my off hours. I'm working." Liam's face crumpled, but he had enough sense or enough experience with her temper to back toward the door. "I'm sorry, Maeve. I'm just trying to fix it. I swear." "You've been trying to fix it for 2 years." Her knuckles were white around the bar towel. "Go." He went. The silence that followed felt louder than it should have. Old Pete was suddenly very interested in his beer. The jukebox had moved on to something instrumental and melancholy. Maeve didn't look at the stranger. Couldn't. Her hands were shaking, and she was furious at herself for letting Liam get to her, for showing weakness in front of a customer, for the burn of tears she absolutely would not let fall. "Brother?" the stranger asked quietly. "None of your business," she snapped. "Fair enough," he said again, and there was no judgment in it, just acknowledgement. She poured herself a shot of the same Jameson and threw it back before she could think better of it, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "He's not a bad person, he just—" "Struggling," the stranger supplied. Maeve's laugh was bitter. "That's a generous word for it." She finally looked at him. Why are you still here? Most people would have left after that little show. He shrugged, massive shoulders rolling. I've seen worse. Besides, the whiskey's good, and the company's interesting. Interesting, she snorted. That's a word. So it's beautiful, but I figured you'd throw me out for that one. Heat flashed through her, part anger, part something else she refused to name. You're old enough to know better than to flirt with a woman who just threatened her brother. I'm old enough to know a lot of things. He met her eyes steadily, including when someone's carrying more weight than they should. The observation hit harder than it should have. Maeve turned away, busying herself with rearranging bottles. You don't know anything about me. No, he agreed, but I know something about drowning, and I know what it looks like when someone's working themselves to the bone to keep someone else afloat. Her hands stilled. She wanted to tell him to mind his own business, wanted to throw him out the way she'd thrown out Liam, but something in his voice, that rumbling, steady certainty, made her pause. He gambles, she said before she could stop herself. My brother. Got in deep with some people who don't take IOUs. I'm paying it off. How much? Enough that I'll be working doubles for the next year. She turned back to face him, chin up, daring him to pity her. And before you ask, no, I don't need saving, I don't need advice, and I definitely don't need some stranger feeling sorry for me. His expression didn't change. Wasn't offering any of that. Just listening. The simplicity of it disarmed her. Maeve found herself studying him properly for the first time. The weathered hands wrapped around his glass, the way he sat like he had all the time in the world, the complete lack of judgment in those dark eyes. What's your name? She asked, surprising herself. Max. He extended a hand across the bar. Maximus technically, but only my mother calls me that. His hand was warm, calloused, strong. She shook it and felt something electric run up her arm, pulled back quickly. Maeve. Irish? My father's idea of honoring heritage. She grabbed a glass and started polishing it just to have something to do. You military? You've got that bearing. Investor, actually. He swirled his whiskey. Though I did some time in the Marines when I was younger. Different lifetime ago. Let me guess, self-made, bootstraps and all of that? Something like that. There was a flicker of something in his expression. Memory, maybe. Grew up poor. Spent most of my 20s angry about it. Spent my 30s doing something about it. And your 40s? Making sure I never went back. He took another sip. Your 50s? Learning that money doesn't fix everything, but it sure helps with most things. Maeve laughed before she could stop herself. A real laugh, not the bitter thing from earlier. That's refreshingly honest. I'm too old to lie about who I am. He held her gaze. Life's too short for pretending. The moment stretched between them, warm and charged. Maeve felt her pulse quicken, felt the pull of something she absolutely should not be feeling for a customer whose last name she didn't even know. She broke eye contact first, clearing her throat. You want another? I should probably get going. But he didn't move. Though I wouldn't mind coming back if that's all right. It's a bar. You can come back if you want to. She tried to sound casual and failed. Just don't expect me to be friendly every time. I'll take my chances. He pulled out his wallet, left 2 20s on the bar for a drink that cost $8. Keep it. I'm not a charity case. Never said you were. He stood, and she was struck again by how big he was. Not just tall, but solid, grounded. Considerate payment for the conversation. Fair trade? She wanted to argue, wanted to shove the money back at him. But $24 extra was $24 closer to Liam's debt being cleared. Fair trade, she muttered. Max nodded, then headed for the door. He paused with his hand on the frame, looking back. That brother of yours, the one you're drowning for, he's lucky to have you. He's lucky I don't kill him, Maeve shot back, but there was no heat in it. That too. Then he smiled, really smiled, not the half smirk from before, and walked out into the sunshine. Maeve stood there for a long moment staring at the door, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. You gonna count that money or just stare where he was? Old Pete called from his corner, amused. Shut up, Pete. She snatched up the 20s, shoving them in the register, went back to wiping down the bar, told herself she'd already forgotten about the stranger with the deep voice and the knowing eyes. Lied to herself spectacularly. Later that evening, after her shift ended and the sun was setting orange and gold over the harbor, Maeve was locking up when Saul, the owner of the Rusty Anchor, came wheezing up the sidewalk. "Maeve, you're still here." Saul was 70, if he was a day, with more hair in his ears than on his head. "Good news." "If it's about cutting my hours, I swear to God." No, opposite, actually." He was grinning. "Got an offer on the place. A serious one." Maeve's stomach dropped. "You're selling?" "Been thinking about it for months. You know my back's shot and Diane wants to move closer to the grandkids." He patted her on the shoulder. "But don't worry, kid. Part of the deal is he keeps the staff on. He'll be fine." "He?" Her voice came out strangled. "Who?" "Some investor guy. Made a great offer, too. Wants to keep the place mostly as is, just update some things. Good news all around." Saul kept talking, something about closing dates and inspections, but Maeve wasn't listening anymore. An investor. Wants to keep the place as is. Her mind flashed to broad shoulders, dark knowing eyes, a voice like distant thunder. No, it couldn't be. Could it? She stood frozen on the sidewalk as Sal ambled away, still chattering. The sea wind picked up, whipping her hair around her face, carrying the salt, sharp promise of a storm rolling in. Maeve had the sudden seeking certainty that the real storm had just walked into her life, wearing a linen shirt and leaving $20 tips. She sighed into the wind. Somewhere out on the water, a ship's bell tolled. The hurricane, it seemed, was just beginning. Maeve didn't sleep that night. She lay in her cramped studio apartment above the fish market, staring at the ceiling while the boats creaked in the harbor and her mind ran in circles. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Max's face, that half smile, those knowing eyes, the way he'd sat there, letting her spill her guts about Liam while knowing good and well he was about to become her boss. By the time dawn broke gray and cold over the water, she'd cycled through fury, humiliation, and back to fury again. He played her. Simple as that. She showed up to her shift at the Rusty Anchor with her hair scraped back in a severe bun, her jaw set, and murder in her hazel eyes. The morning regulars took one look at her face and wisely kept their distance. The door opened at 10:30. Max walked in wearing dark jeans and a Henley that showed off arms that had definitely not been built in a gym. He looked rested, casual, completely at ease. Maeve wanted to throw a bottle at his head. "Morning," he said, with that bass voice rumbling through the empty bar. "Get out." He raised an eyebrow. "I own the place now. Signed the papers yesterday evening." "I don't care if you own the whole dang town." She planted her feet on the bar, leaning forward. "Get out." "Maeve, don't." Her voice could have cut glass. "Don't you dare say my name like we're friends, like you didn't just sit there." She jabbed a finger at the bar stool. "And let me tell you all about my life while you were lying through your teeth." "I never lied to you." "You let me think you were just some tourist passing through." "You never asked." He moved closer to the bar, maddeningly calm. "I told you I was an investor. I told you I was interested in the place. You know good and well that that's not the same thing." Her voice was rising now, sharp and fierce. "You sat there and watched me break down about Liam, about the debt, and you didn't even say a word about buying the place, about becoming my boss." Something flickered in his expression. "Would you have talked to me if I had told you?" "No." "Exactly." He leaned against the bar, and despite her fury, Maeve was aware of how close he was, how solid. "I wanted to know who you were before you knew who I was. Wanted to see the real Maeve, not the version who'd perform for the new owner." "That's not your choice to make." "Maybe not." His eye held hers. "But I made it anyway." The admission, the complete lack of apology in it, somehow made it worse. Maeve grabbed a glass from the rack and slammed it down on the bar hard enough that she was surprised it didn't shatter. "You want a drink?" Her voice was acid. "That's what customers do, right? Oh, wait, you're not a customer anymore. You're my boss. So what do bosses do? Inspect? Criticize? Fire people who don't smile pretty? I'm not going to fire you, Maeve. Oh, how generous, she laughed, bitter and sharp. The king grants mercy to the peasants. Should I curtsy? You're angry. I get it. You don't get anything. She turned away, started aggressively polishing glasses. You show up here with your money and your knowing looks and your voice, and you think you can just buy your way into people's lives? My voice? Despite the tension, there was amusement in his tone. Maeve whirled back. Don't. Don't what? Don't do that thing where you smirk like this is interesting, like I'm some fiery little spitfire putting on a show for you. She jabbed a finger at him. I am not here for your amusement. The humor vanished from his face. When he spoke again, his voice was serious, steady. I know that. Do you? She crossed her arms. Because where I'm standing, you came in here, charmed your way past my defenses, collected information, and then bought the place out from under me. That sounds like a game to me. It's not a game. He straightened, and suddenly he seemed bigger, more imposing. I came here looking at a business investment. The bar's been losing money for years. Sal wanted out, and the location's prime. It was supposed to be simple. But then I walked in and saw you. His voice dropped rough around the edges. Saw you working yourself to death, sharp as broken glass, carrying your brother's weight like it was yours to carry, and I wanted to know why. That's not your business. I know. He cut her off, moving around the bar before she could stop him. Suddenly he was in her space, close enough that she could smell salt and cedar and something uniquely him. I know it's not my business. I know I should have told you who I was. But Maeve, I've spent 30 years reading people, making deals, knowing when something's valuable. And you... He stopped, jaw working. What? She demanded, hating how breathless she sounded. I what? You're the most valuable thing in this whole place. The words hung between them, heavy and charged. Maeve's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. She stepped back. She put distance between them. Should not be noticing the flecks of silver in his dark hair or the way his pulse jumped in his throat. You can't say things like that, she whispered. Why not? Because you're my boss now. Because there are rules about this kind of thing. Because... She broke off, turning away. Because it's not fair. What's not fair? That you walked in here and turned everything upside down. The words burst out of her. I had a plan, Max. Work the bar, pay off Liam's debt, keep my head down. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. And now you're here and everything's complicated and I can't think straight when you're around. Silence. Then quietly, good. She spun back. Good? You think I can think straight around you? He let out a rough laugh. Maeve, I came back yesterday to tell you the truth, to explain. I walked in here planning to be professional, to keep my distance, and then I saw you with your brother, and I saw exactly who you were, loyal and fierce, and breaking yourself into pieces for someone who doesn't deserve it. And all I could think was that I wanted to take some of that weight off of your shoulders. I know you don't need saving. He stepped closer again, and this time she didn't back up. You've made that abundantly clear. But wanting to help someone isn't the same thing as thinking they're helpless. Maeve opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't know what to do with you. You don't have to do anything with me. His voice softened. I bought the par because it was a good investment. I kept you on because you're good at your job, and Sal said you were the heart of this place. Everything else, he gestured between them, is separate. Completely your choice. What if I choose to hate you? Then you hate me. He shrugged those massive shoulders. Won't change how I feel. And how do you feel? The question came out smaller than she meant it to, more vulnerable. Max looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes steady and certain. like I walked into this bar looking for an investment and found something I didn't know I was missing. Oh no. Maeve felt her walls cracking, felt the fury that had sustained her all night starting to drain away. She wanted to hold on to it, needed to hold on to it, because anger was safe, and this thing building between them absolutely was not. "You have a heck of a lot of nerve," she said, but there was no heat in it anymore. "Been told that before." A hint of that smile returned, "Usually right before I get what I want." "And what do you want?" "Right now," he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of copper hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm, calloused, gentle. "I want you to stop looking at me like I'm the enemy." Her breath caught. "What should I look at you like?" "However you want." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, feather light. "As long as you're looking." The moment stretched taut between them. Maeve was actually aware of everything, the early morning light slanting through the windows, the creak of the building settling, the warmth of his hand against her face. She could lean in, could close the distance, could find out if his lips were as firm as they looked. The door banged open. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Liam stood in the doorway looking somewhat worse than yesterday. His eyes darted between them, confusion flickering across his gaunt face. "Maeve, who's this?" "None of your business," Maeve snapped, grateful for the interruption and furious at it in equal measure. "I told you not to come here." I know, but Maeve, they're saying I have until Friday." "Liam, I swear to God." "How much?" Mac's voice cut through the rising argument. Both O'Sullivans turned to stare at him. "What?" Liam said. "The debt. How much do you owe, and to whom?" "That's not," Maeve started, but Liam was already talking. 42,000, give or take. Guy named Marcus Rourke runs a poker game out of the back of..." "I know who he is." Max's expression had gone hard. "And you're done with him as of today?" "Max, no," Maeve began, but he'd already pulled out his phone. "This is between you and me now," Max said to Liam, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made grown men straighten their spines. "I'll handle Rourke. You handle getting yourself to a meeting. There's a Gamblers Anonymous that meets at St. Mary's on Tuesday nights. You'll be there." Liam's eyes had gone wide. I can't ask you to..." "You're not asking. I'm telling. Your sister's been carrying you long enough. Time you started carrying yourself." "Why would you do this?" Liam's voice cracked. Max's eyes slid to Maeve, something complicated moving in their depths. "Because someone I respect asked me to." Maeve felt her throat tighten. She hadn't asked, hadn't said a word, but he'd heard her anyway. In every exhausted line of her body, in every bitter word about drowning to keep Liam afloat. "Get out," she told her brother, voice rough. "Go home, sober up. And Liam," he turned to look at her, "if you blow this chance, if you take this man's money and throw it away on another game, I will never speak to you again. Do you understand me?" Liam nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I understand, I swear, Maeve. I'll do better, I promise." "Then prove it." He left, stumbling over the threshold. Maeve stood frozen, staring at the closed door. She felt like she'd been hit by a wave, knocked off her feet, tumbling, not sure which way was up. "You shouldn't have done that," she said finally. "Probably not." $42,000, Max. "That's nothing," he said simply. "Money I won't miss." "It's not nothing to me." She finally looked up at him, and she knew her eyes were bright with unshed tears. You can't fix everything with money." "I'm not trying to fix everything." He moved closer cautiously now. "Just this one thing, just to give you back your life." "Why?" "You know why." She did. God help her, she did. Maeve closed the distance between them in 2 steps and kissed him. It wasn't gentle, wasn't soft. It was all the fury and frustration and fear of the last 24 hours crashing together, her hands fisting in his shirt, his arms coming around her waist, her back hitting the bar as he lifted her onto it. He kissed like he did everything else, confident and thorough, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other one spanning her waist. She tasted whiskey and want, felt the rumble of a groan in his chest as he hooked her ankles around his hips and pulled him closer. "Maeve," he breathed against her mouth, and his voice was wrecked. She pulled back just enough to look at him, this man who'd walked into her life 3 days ago and demolished every wall she had built. His lips were swollen, his eyes dark and heated, and he was looking at her like she was water, and he was dying of thirst. "This doesn't mean I forgive you," she whispered. "I know. And it doesn't mean this is simple. Never thought it was. And you're still an arrogant butt who thinks he can buy his way into people's lives." "Probably." His thumb stroked along her jaw. "You gonna kiss me again anyway?" Maeve pulled him down by his collar. "Shut up, Max." He did. And somewhere outside, the storm clouds that had been gathering finally broke, rain hammering against the windows of the Rusty Anchor, while inside 2 people who'd spent too long drowning finally came up for air. 3 weeks later, Maeve was trying to figure out what in the world she had gotten herself into. The Rusty Anchor looked different now, not dramatically, but in small ways that added up. New lighting that made the brass gleam instead of looking dingy. The bathrooms actually worked. Fresh paint on the walls, carefully matched to the original color so that the irregulars wouldn't notice. Max had a talent for fixing things without making them feel fixed. He also had a talent for driving her absolutely insane. "You can't fire Pete," Maeve said, arms crossed, standing in what was now Max's office. It had been a storage room 2 weeks ago. Now it had a desk, a leather chair, and sailing charts framed on the walls. Max didn't look up from his laptop. "I'm not firing Pete. I'm suggesting he might enjoy retirement. He's 68, and this bar is his entire social life. He also drinks half our inventory and hasn't paid a full tab in 6 months. So," Maeve leaned on the desk, "he's Pete. He's been coming here since before I was born." Max Fine looked up, and despite her irritation, Maeve felt that now familiar flutter in her stomach. 3 weeks of stolen kisses and heated arguments, and she still wasn't used to the way he looked at her, like she was simultaneously the most frustrating and most fascinating thing he'd ever encountered. "So," he said calmly, "we give him a tab limit, $20 a week, on the house. Call it a community investment." Maeve blinked. Oh, that hint of a smile appeared. "Not what you expected?" "I expected you to be a heartless businessman." "I am a heartless businessman." He stood moving around the desk. "But also, I'm not an idiot. Pete's part of this place. The character you talked about. That's worth $20 a week." She softened despite herself. "You're still infuriating." "You've mentioned that." He was close now, close enough that she could smell cedar and salt and coffee. "Usually right before you kiss me." "That was twice. 7 times, he corrected. "But who's counting?" "You, apparently." But she was smiling now, and when he reached for her, she didn't pull away. His hands settled on her waist, warm and solid through her t-shirt. "How's Liam?" he asked quietly. The question made her chest tighten, in a good way for once. 3 weeks sober, going to meetings, got a job at the marina. She looked up at him. "You check in on him, don't you? I know you do." "Might have had a coffee with him a couple of times." Max's expression was carefully neutral. Made sure he knew that the debt was cleared but not forgotten, that this was his one shot. And he's terrified of disappointing you again." His thumb traced circles on her hip. "Kid's got a long way to go, but he's trying. That counts for something." Maeve felt tears prick her eyes. She'd cried more in the last 3 weeks than she had in 3 years, but they were different tears. Relief, release, the kind that came when you finally stopped holding everything together and let someone else help carry the weight. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do." She pressed her palms against his chest, felt the steady thrum of his heartbeat. You didn't have to do any of this. The debt, the bar, putting up with my temper. I like your temper. He said it simply, like it was a fact. You think I want some watered-down version of you? Some woman who smiles and nods and doesn't tell me when I'm being a butt? You are being a butt most of the time. Exactly. He grinned. And you're the only person who calls me on it. Everyone else is too busy trying to kiss up to the guy with the money. His expression turned serious. You kiss me because you want to. Big difference. Cocky. Confident. He dipped his head, brushed his lips against her temple. There's a difference. Maeve shivered. 3 weeks and every touch still felt electric. We should probably talk about what this is. What do you want it to be? Always throwing it back to her, making her choose. It should have annoyed her. Probably would have annoyed her with anyone else, but with Max it felt different. Like he was giving her power, not dodging responsibility. I don't know, she admitted. I've never done this before. What, dated your boss? He was teasing now, but there was an edge of genuine concern underneath. Because we can figure that out. I'll sell the bar, find someone else to manage it. No, the word came out fierce. Don't you dare. This place is a good investment and you know it. And she took a breath. I like that you own it. Like that you're fixing it up without destroying what makes it special. Like that you actually listen when I tell you something matters. But I'm scared. The admission felt like stepping off of a cliff. I'm 35 years old, Mac. I spent the last decade taking care of Liam, working myself to death, keeping my head down. I don't know how to be with someone who wants to be there for me. His hands tightened on her waist. Who says I want to take care of you? She pulled back, stung. I thought I want to be with you, he interrupted. That's not the same thing. You don't need taking care of, Maeve. You need a partner. Someone who's going to have your back when things get hard. Someone who will fight with you and for you and won't disappear when you show teeth. His voice dropped, rough and honest. I'm 53 years old. I've had relationships that look good on paper. Pretty women who liked my money and didn't mind that I worked too much. But they never saw me. Not really. And I do? You see everything. He cupped her face, hands stroking her cheekbones. The parts I try to hide, and you don't flinch. He shook his head. That's rare. That's worth fighting for. Maeve felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked tight for years. I'm not easy to be with. Good. I don't want easy. I have a temper. Notice that. And I'm fiercely independent, and I'll probably fight you on everything. Maeve. He leaned his forehead against hers. I walked into this bar looking for an investment, and I found you instead. You think I'm going to run because you're difficult. I grew up with nothing, fought for everything I have, built a life from scratch. His voice turned gravely. You think I don't know how to dance with fire? Oh. The metaphor clicked into place. Everything they'd been circling for 3 weeks. He wasn't trying to tame her or smooth her edges or make her easier to handle. He was matching her flame for flame, meeting her intensity with his own steady heat. I'm falling for you, she blurted out, then immediately wanted to take it back. Too much, too soon, Thank God. Max kissed her, deep and thoroughly, and claiming, because I failed 3 weeks ago, and I've been wanting you to catch up. Maeve laughed against his mouth, giddy and terrified and more alive than she'd felt in years. You're so full of yourself. You like that about me. I really don't. Liar. He nibbled her bottom lip. You love it. She did. God help her, she absolutely did. This time when she kissed him, it was different from the angry, desperate kiss in the bar or the stolen moments in the stockroom or the heated goodbye last week when he'd left for a business trip. This was slower, deeper, a promise instead of a question. His hand slid into her hair, careful of the pins holding it up, and she'd made a frustrated sound against his mouth. What? He muttered. Take it down. Your hair? Everything. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm tired of holding everything together, tired of being careful. She didn't finish, didn't need to. Max understood. He always understood, and his fingers found the pins, pulling them free one by one until her copper hair tumbled down around her shoulders in wild waves. Beautiful, he said, reverent, and kissed her again. Time did something strange then, stretched and condensed all at once. Maeve was aware of his hands in her hair, her fingers clutching his shoulders, the solid warmth of him against her, was aware of feeling safe for the first time in years, safe enough to fall, safe enough to let go. When they finally broke apart, they both breathing hard, Max's voice was rough. Have dinner with me. My place. It wasn't really a question, more like an invitation to step into something bigger than both of them. Okay, Max whispered. Okay, Maeve whispered. Okay? Yeah, she smiled fierce and real, utterly unguarded. Yes. His house was on the cliffs overlooking the harbor, all windows and weathered wood, and the kind of understated elegance that came from having money, but not needing to show it off. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and crimson, and Maeve stood on the deck watching the boat sway while Max grilled salmon in the kitchen. You can see the rusty anchor from here, she called. I know. He appeared beside her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. That's why I bought the place. She turned to stare at him. You bought a $3 million house so you could see a dive bar? I bought a $3 million house so I could see where you work. He handed her a glass. Figured if things went well, I'd get to watch you come and go. If they didn't, at least I'd have a good view to drink to. That's, she didn't have words, romantic, stalkerish, both? Max. Too much? Maybe. She took a sip of wine. It was perfect, of course, because he had paid attention to details. But I kind of love it anyway. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower. Maeve felt something settle in her chest, not the heavy weight she'd been carrying for years, but something lighter, steadier, like an anchor, she realized, not dragging her down, but keeping her grounded. I should probably tell you, she said finally, my apartment is a disaster, studio above the fish market. You can hear every boat that comes in at dawn. Sounds terrible. It is, she turned to face him. But it's mine. I worked for it, paid for it myself. He studied her for a long moment. You think I'm going to ask you to give it up? Aren't you? No. He set down his glass, pulled her closer. I'm going to ask you to keep it for as long as you need it. Your space, your independence, the thing you built when everything else was falling apart. His voice dropped. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, there's room here. But that's your choice, Maeve, not mine. She felt tears slip down her cheeks, happy ones this time. You're going to ruin me for other men. Good. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. That's the plan. Arrogant. You're arrogant. He pulled back just enough to look at her. If you'll have me. Maeve thought about the girl she'd been at 25, angry and scared and determined to handle everything alone. Thought about the woman she'd become at 35, still angry, still fierce, but tired of drowning. She thought about the man in front of her, who'd walked into her life like a hurricane and somehow became the calm center of her storm. Yeah, she said, standing on her toes to kiss him. I'll have you. The sun finished setting. The boats rocked in the harbor, and somewhere below them, the rusty anchor waited. Not perfect, not fancy, but solid and real, and finally becoming home. They had dinner on the deck, grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, and a salad that Max admitted came from the fancy grocery store because he couldn't cook everything. They talked about the bar, about Liam's progress, about Max's next business trip, and whether Maeve wanted to come along. I just can't leave the bar, she protested. You could if you promoted Danny to assistant manager. Danny's 23. and hungry to prove himself. Max refilled her wine. You don't have to do everything yourself anymore, Maeve. That's what having a partner means. The words settled between them. Partner. Not just romantic, but in every sense. Business, life, the weight she'd been carrying alone, finally shared. I'll think about it, she said, which they both knew meant yes. Later, when the stars came out and the wind picked up, Max walked her to her car. The parking lot was gravel and seagrass, her beat-up Honda looking distinctly out of place next to his Mercedes. I could drive you home, he offered. I'm fine. She lingered, her back against the car door, her hands on either side of her. This was nice. Just nice? Amazing. She pulled him down for a kiss, slow and deep and full of promise. Terrifying. Perfect. All of the above? Yeah. She traced a scar on his shoulder through his shirt. When do I see you again? Tomorrow. I'll come by the bar for lunch. You don't have to do that. I want to. Besides, I like watching you work. You're magnificent when you're telling drunk guys to get lost. She laughed. You're ridiculous. You love it. She did. Maeve drove home through the dark harbor roads, her heart full and her mind racing. Her apartment was exactly as terrible as she had described, cramped and loud and smelling faintly of fish. But when she climbed into her narrow bed and pulled up the threadbare quilt, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Her phone buzzed, a text from Max. Made it home safe? She smiled, typing back, yes, thank you for dinner. Thank you for giving me a chance. Don't make me regret it. Wouldn't dream of it. Sleep well, Maeve. She fell asleep with her phone clutched in her hand, dreaming of cliff houses and calm centers and a man who saw her fire and wasn't afraid to burn. 6 months later, Maeve stood behind the bar at the Rusty Anchor, pouring drinks and trading insults with regulars. Liam was 7 months sober, working full-time at the marina, and slowly paying Max back, even though Max insisted it wasn't necessary. Pete had his $20 tab and spent most afternoons regaling anyone who'd listened with stories about the old days. And Max? Max sat at the end of the bar, working on his laptop and stealing glances at her when he thought she wasn't looking. She always was. You know, she said, leaning across the bar, it's creepy when the owner stares at the employees. Good thing you're not just an employee. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. The simple gold band on her left ring finger caught the light. 3 months married. 3 months of living in his cliff house full-time after she'd finally tearfully given up the keys to her studio apartment. It had been harder than she expected. That cramped, loud space above the fish market had been hers. Proof she could survive alone. But Max had held her while she cried over the lease termination papers, understanding without a word that it wasn't about the apartment. It was about trust, about believing she wouldn't drown if she let go of her lifeboat. How's the quarterly report? She asked. We're up 18%, he grinned. Turns out hiring your wife as general manager was a good business decision. Hiring, she snorted. You begged. I negotiated firmly. You literally got on your knees. Different occasion. His eyes heated. Though if you want to discuss me on my knees. Max! She was laughing, cheeks flushed. We're at work. We own the place. We can do what we want. You own the place. I just work here. We've had this argument. He stood, moving around the bar in that confident way of his. You're part owner now. Deal with it. I didn't want... I know. You wanted to earn it. He kissed her temple. You did. 18% growth, stellar reviews, 3 new corporate events booked. You earned it, Maeve. She softened, leaning into him. You're still infuriating. And you're still fierce. His arms around her waist. Guess we're stuck with each other. Guess so. Outside, the sun setting over the harbor, the boat swayed, the wind picked up, carrying the salt-sharp promise of weather to come. But inside the Rusty Anchor, surrounded by brass and wood and 40 years of stories, Maeve O'Sullivan, whatever she was now, felt something she'd never expected to feel. Peace. She'd given up her studio apartment the day after they married, her escape hatch, her proof she could survive alone. It had terrified her signing those papers, but every morning she woke up in the cliff house to Max's steady breathing and the sound of the sea. She understood a little more that letting go of the apartment didn't mean losing herself. It meant trusting that she could stand alone if she had to, but choosing not to. The storm had passed, the calm had come, and she was finally learning what home could mean. Not a place, but a person, a partnership, a choice made every single day. "I love you," she said sunnily, fiercely. Max's smile was slow and knowing and utterly content. "I know." Cocky, confident, he pulled her closer. "And desperately, completely in love with you too." Outside the wind howled, inside everything was calm, and Maeve O'Sullivan, fierce, independent, no longer drowning, finally understood what it meant to be found. The end. If you liked the story, please consider subscribing and let me know where you're listening from. We'd love to hear from you.